Welcome to this episode of the Business of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Britt Berrett of the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management at the Jindal School here at UT Dallas. One of the most critical issues facing healthcare today is leading change into the future. We've been strong advocates of the dynamics of business and engaging business practices in the delivery of healthcare. $3 trillion industry, 20% of the GDP, growing at a phenomenal rate. Yes, indeed, healthcare requires smart business practices. In the business world, there's a lot of dialogue and conversation about leading change. How do you move an organization from one state of being to the next? Leadership denotes this effort, this process, individuals that will lead change. Strategic planning incorporates the efforts, the specific activities that lead the change. But I'd like to highlight a great work by John Kotter. Kotter is one of the most prominent leaders and writers on the literature of change management. In his book, Leading Change, he identifies an eight-stage process of creating major change. I'd like to walk through that and ponder and consider how leading change in healthcare can be made possible through, I think, smart business practices. Kotter begins with establishing a sense of urgency. Consider for a moment any healthcare organization today. I think we don't need a sense of urgency. As a matter of fact, it's almost overwhelming. Changes in reimbursement, new technology, evolving demographic, both locally, regionally, and nationally, and also expectations. There is an urgency in leading change in healthcare that for many can be overwhelming. Once that sense of urgency is established, some call that a burning platform. Why must we change? There's a second step that requires the creation of a guiding coalition, pulling together teams, individuals, men and women that share a similar purpose and meaning. Identifying those individuals can be daunting. It's sometimes challenging. It sometimes requires you to think outside the box. But organizations in healthcare that lead change have to bring together a coalition. I think what you've seen most recently is the recognition that clinicians must be part of that process. Leading change in a silo, in a business environment, without including the clinical staff is a major mistake. We're seeing a lot of physician leaders that are emerging as leaders in this creation of a coalition. The University of Texas at Dallas and the Jindal School of Management have been on the forefront of this. About 20 years ago, the Alliance for Medical Management Education was created. This is a graduate program exclusively for physician leaders. Imagine, if you will, some very aspiring, ambitious physicians who in their practice recognize the need to gain business sense and business skills. They work with the director of the program, and through a series of cohort-modeled programs every 6 weeks, they learn the basics and the dynamics, healthcare policy, healthcare finance, determining quality, identifying an organization's strategy. They have modules in a variety of areas, and this, I think, allows the creation of coalitions with physicians that are better trained, better educated, and better prepared. Third step, developing a vision and strategy. Now, some might roll their eyes when we start pontificating about the creation of a vision, but just stick with me for a moment. One must ask the question, where are we going? What will we become? What will we be described as? The mission statement is always who we are, what we're about, how we were established. We've been here 60 years, and we were founded on X, Y, and Z. Vision is different. Vision is where are we going? What will we become? Visioning exercises can honestly become very empowering, or if done incorrectly, annoying and time-consuming. So Kotter describes a couple of behaviors along these lines, but my personal experience would confirm that mentally envisioning an organization's future state can be very powerful. I remember many years ago, we were in the process at a local hospital of creating a children's program. And I would drive up into the parking lot every morning, pull up and I would look up the building and I would envision our children's hospital attached to the main hospital. Fast forward about 6 years and the steel went into the ground and what emerged was a magnificent children's hospital. So I think visioning and envisioning is the creation of something mentally before it's created physically. Not only must one create a vision, but how do you get there? What are the strategies? What are the 4 or 5 things that must be done to make that possible? Okay, I'm going through these fast, but I think it's important. Step 4, communicating the change vision, using virtually every vehicle to communicate the change of the organization. So returning to the image of a children's hospital and feeling it and sensing it and tangibly imagining it, creating the strategies and then communicating those strategies is powerful. Today, we live in a multimedia world, so the written word is insufficient. Today, we're on a podcast. You're probably enjoying this on a drive or on a walk or exercising or something of that nature. 15 years ago, this was unimaginable. Consider new technologies for communicating your vision. Communicating that vision, multimedia can be very useful, and organizations appreciate creativity. My last thought on communicating the change vision is recognize we live in a world of millennials. They live on their cell phones. They're digital. They're always connected. So how can you leverage those strategies to communicate the vision? 5th step, get rid of obstacles. 5, empowering broad-based action is the title, but get rid of obstacles. Look at issues or individuals that will deter you from succeeding. In a recent book entitled Patience Comes Second, one of the chapters is entitled No Whiners, No Losers, No Jerks. What the authors are saying is get rid of people that will take away from that vision. It's a hard thing to do, but imperative if you're going to move major change in an organization. Consider your next big objective. And as you mentally create that image, in your mind will pop up the face of an individual that you think will submarine the effort. They will be the naysayer. They will be the obstacle. They will be the individual that no matter what's proposed, they will try to thwart your effort. Now, be clear. I'm not suggesting that contrary viewpoints should be eliminated. No, that's part of the engagement in the process. This is different. I'm referring to individuals who intentionally submarine a major change initiative. They can't be engaged. It's time-consuming. Sometimes it's unnecessary effort to try and convince them. It's been my experience that, unfortunately, 20% of my employees took up 80% of my time. It wasn't until I recognized the importance of eliminating these obstacles that we're able to move the organization forward more swiftly. 6, generate short-term wins. Celebrate those wins. Recognize that you're on a great journey towards organizational change. If it's an initiative or a program or a strategy, celebrate some of the wins along the way. Sometimes those are minor, sometimes those could be even more significant, but those short-term wins allow you to inspire and energize the team. Sometimes we sit together and consider a 3 to 5 to 7 year strategy. There was a day when I remember making 10-year strategic plans. I think those have gone by the wayside. We have a very short change cycle, so generate short-term wins. Sometimes you even need to create those wins. Sometimes you have celebrations that are mid-mark on the completion of an initiative. Celebration becomes a very important tool in the process of change. 7, consolidate your gains and produce more change. Well, what this is really speaking is bring more individuals into your coalition. Expand your reach. You've got a small cohort of individuals who are creating the guiding coalition. Reach out and include others in that process. Maybe when you're celebrating successes and short game successes, you identify individuals that could be part of a greater organization change and involve them Eighth step, and certainly not the least important, but more certainly profound, is anchoring new approaches in the culture. Once you've created this change, once you've determined that you've achieved the change, anchor it in the culture. Begin the process of ensuring that it's sustained. My father was a great leader, and one of the things he taught me was when you leave, the organization should continue to be successful, if not more successful. And how is that done? Well, let me pivot for a moment and talk about these 8 steps of change and reflect upon how they align with the theory of transformational leadership. Great organizations and great individuals transform themselves. They are not static. They are not waiting for change to be placed upon them. They're dynamic and consistently observing the terrain, assessing and determining what needs to occur. This is the transformation of an organization, and I would suggest the transformation of an individual. So ask yourself, what major change have you made in your life? Have you added additional educational experiences? Have you challenged yourself to do more and be more, both personally and professionally? This is transformation. You move from one state of being to the next. Transformational change has been very popular. Burns spoke about this, as did Bass and several others. They suggest that organizations and individuals need to transform who they are to deal with a very dynamic and changing organization and or community. Organizations that are unwilling to make those changes are lost and are in complete peril of failure. We've seen industries and we've seen businesses that have been unwilling to transform. That transformation is painful and sometimes costly, but necessary. On a personal note, I recall many years ago, I was leading a major healthcare system in this area, and I knew that I had to become better. I had to become more educated. And so in the midst of running a major system, being a father and a husband, working in the community, I decided to return to school to pursue my PhD. Some thought I was crazy, but I realized that I needed to make this major change. So I went through the 8 steps that I've just delineated, found in Kotter's work. I felt an urgency. I felt like I needed to become a more effective leader, and I needed to educate myself. I created a guiding coalition. In this sense, it was me and my wife and our family that would lead this change. I developed a vision and a strategy. Imagined what it would be like to be awarded my PhD and what classes I needed to take and what sacrifices need to be made. I started communicating the vision. I shared with my friends and family members that, in fact, I was going to pursue a PhD. I lit the fire and I wasn't able to put it out. I empowered broad-based actions. I got rid of obstacles. We turned off the television in our house. And no more news broadcasts, and in some ways that was a real blessing. But I had to empower broad-based action. Saturday mornings, I was dedicated to research and writing, generating short-term wins. Every time I finished a semester, my wife and I would go out and celebrate, consolidating the gains and producing more change. As I got closer to finishing my PhD, the articles that I was reading, I would share with those around me, and then I would encourage them to participate in my conversations regarding my dissertation. I found that individuals would provide, I think, interesting articles and perspectives on my dissertation. And last, I anchored myself in the new college culture. With this PhD, I felt better prepared to engage conversations that were perhaps a little more academic and scholarly, but most certainly a purposeful approach to change who I was. I think that was one of the great personal changes of my life, but it didn't come without a cost. And to that end, I learned how to sacrifice to implement change. I will say this, my father, a very wise business executive, once taught me, you can change and pick the change, or the change can pick you, meaning you can determine where you're going to be and make the sacrifices to achieve that change, or the world will change around you and force you to change. I choose the former rather than the latter. And today on this podcast, I'd encourage you to think the same. I'd encourage you to consider how we can lead change in healthcare, how we can do things differently, how we can embrace new ideas and new strategies that respond to a very dynamic and changing world. Kotter's given us an 8-stage process of creating major change. I invite you to do the same. Thanks for joining us here on the Business of Healthcare podcast. Join us online at businessofhealthcarepodcast.com to find episodes, notes, links, and more. And be sure to subscribe to the Business of Healthcare podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. To learn more about the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management, go to jindal.utdallas.edu and then search under the Centers and Institutes tab on the navigation menu. I'm Dr. Britt Berrett, Director of the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management, where we're leading change by changing how we lead.